Now, I'm going to dig in with a few top tips on keeping going. And this is based on some of the survey responses that we got from you. And we found there was particular things that IOP publishing authors struggled with and that held them back from writing. And they were specifically around getting started, so finding the time and getting going. The keeping going bit, so being motivated, being able to make progress, and specifically finishing projects. So what we've got is some quick tips that will just run through some approaches that we suggest you might like to experiment with. So first tip is something called Pomodoro, which many people have heard of, and often not everybody uses it, but it is incredibly effective, particularly when you're trying to build up your writing practice. So Pomodoro was invented by an academic called Cirillo, and it's just as simple as a tomato timer. And what you do is you set it for 25 minutes, and in those 25 minutes, you're allowed to do nothing but write. So if you're a bit stuck, it's okay just to sit, but you either do nothing or you write, but you sit for that 25 minutes. Then you get a 5-minute break, and that's classed, that half an hour is your first Pomodoro, and then you repeat it. And you might be able to do 2, 3, or 4, and then take a longer break. And you find over time, you can get quite competitive about how many Pomodoros you can achieve in an overall writing session. And it's just really good for keeping focused and keeping attention on your writing. And I really do swear you should give it a go. Find a timer on your phone, on a smartphone, and use that to keep you making progress on your writing. Now, the next tip I'm going to talk about is around goal setting. And goal setting is really, really important because without goals, we don't know what we're trying to achieve. So it's really important to have something in mind to get you focused on. So it can be a specific project. But what you need to do is make that goal a SMART goal. So many of you would have heard of this acronym. So SMART means being specific. So what is the project? Being measurable. What are you trying to do with it? Is it a first draft? Is it a certain number of words? It needs to be achievable. So writing a book can actually be a little bit too ambitious, but focusing on writing a chapter makes it, again, much more measurable and much more achievable, which makes it realistic and then time bound. So set yourself a deadline so you know when you've got to get it done, you've got something to work towards. And if you've set the kind of making it measurable, you'll know when you've achieved it. So setting goals is really, really helpful to give you a focus to your writing. But there's a world of difference between having a goal and having an implementation plan. And it's an implementation plan that gets you writing. So one way to think about that is to look at small steps. And this has got lots of research for behaviour change ground in neuroscience and psychology. And what this does is by focusing on what you're going to do next, so literally the next task, it kind of overcomes the fear of the big project or the big goal. And it helps you just make progress and see that you're making progress. So knowing what you need to do next. And that really helps you keep going, particularly if you're feeling a bit blocked or if you've got gaps in between your writing sessions. Knowing what you're going to do next, what the next small step is, will get you back into your writing faster. Now that leads me on to my next tip, which is about building in accountability structures. Now, accountability structures are really, really important because they give you the support around your environment to keep you writing. And I think academia is fantastic for accountability structures. If you think back to the days when you were doing your PhD, you had a supervisor and you were accountable to them to make progress, particularly in the final writing up stage. But once your PhD is over, there are other support structures available within academia. I've been really excited by the rise of the Shut Up and Write movement, which is where universities and institutions form sessions where they just literally come together and write. And if you can't find one of those in your institution, you might be able to find one of them online. And there's lots and lots of writing groups available. If you can't find a formal writing group, it's worth talking to other researchers and seeing if you can set up something informal. So we know lots of academics that organise within their department particular writing days, trying to get them done regularly once a month, and other people who might just have accountability buddies where they quite literally, it works very well with time boxing, this one, that structure for finding time to write, is sending a meeting appointment with a venue, so it's blocked out of your calendar so your colleagues can't steal that time, and then you meet. And many academics we know use the library for this. So they set up a schedule, they go to the library, they don't even have to sit together, they often acknowledge each other's presence, and for that hour and a half that they've all blocked out in their calendar, they sit and they write. And I would really, really suggest that you think about what sorts of structures might work for you. And while you do this, think about whether you really like external accountability. Is working with other people something that's going to help? Some of us are more internally motivated, so things like deadlines and particularly rewards can make a big, big difference. And don't underestimate the power of rewards, because in building a habit and a routine, a reward is a really important part of the cycle. So focusing on what's going to trigger your writing, such as having an appointment, and then what's going to sort of embed that habit. So saving, a coffee for afterwards. Okay.
So I was just going to interject there quickly. The other thing that academics often use is co-authoring as a way to be accountable to, obviously, a co-author. I think that's really, if you haven't done that, lots of academics obviously already do co-authoring, but if you haven't done that, try that, and maybe try that more frequently if it's something that actually works for you. And the other thing that academics often use is conferences, writing to conferences. Now, that's an accountability technique, because you're submitting a conference paper to other people and promising them that you will present it at that particular time. So therefore, in that way, academics often set themselves kind of like these milestones in the future, from one conference to the next, knowing that they will have to submit to that particular event, and that often keeps them going. So, next one.
Okay, so on to my final quick tip on keeping going. And this is really focused on overcoming blocks and barriers. So many of us kind of think that we have to be in the right mood to write, and we often aren't. So generative writing, so using techniques like free writing, is a really good and research-backed technique for overcoming blocks and barriers. So if you sit down and you're feeling blocked, literally just starting to free write makes a big difference. Other people prefer to do things like writing lists, focusing on what they're going to achieve in that session. They could do bullet points of things they need to do. What you want to do is overcome that fear of the blank page. So thinking about this is a big goal you're trying to achieve. Focus on the small step. What are you going to do in that session? What does that look like? Free write your way through it. Talk through the structure. And again, using things like the habits approach, so thinking about triggers and rewards and rituals. So some of us, particularly if we've had gaps in between our writing sessions, it can be quite hard to get going again. So having something that kind of warms up your sort of writing muscles is really, really helpful. But the important thing is to sort of time box those pre-writing rituals so they don't become procrastination. So by all means, read the last few paragraphs that you did last time, but don't start editing them. If your focus is writing, you need to write and not edit. Other writing rituals, they just get you going and get you into that headspace. And we found when we asked authors at the IOP what rituals they had, there was some really great tips that came back from people about how they got into the mood and how they got themselves writing.
I was just going to say, and again, just another quick one. Often, sometimes when you are stuck and when you have blocks and barriers, just a simple change in your mindset can actually be really, really a useful thing to think about and a useful thing to do. So, for example, one thing that we advise people to think of is often starting on a piece of writing that people believe is the almost like the finished article is it can be often overwhelming. So we just often say, just think of the thing that you're writing as, we call it draft zero, just something to get you started, because it's far better to have, whatever you're writing, it's far better to have something on the page rather than it be a blank page. You can always go back and edit. You can always go back and add more data or research into that article, into whatever you're writing, but you're never going to be able to do it if you don't make a start. So just think of what you're writing as just a draft zero, and that's really useful way to put your perfectionism to one side and just concentrate on getting something on the page that you can edit and work on later.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of this kind of quick tip session. I'm moving on to our fourth and final part of this webinar. So just to sort of do a bit of a recap for those of you who have just joined us. What we've done is we've talked through distraction, so identifying your distraction tendencies and how you can overcome those. We've talked a little bit about the approaches that different writers have used to finding time, and about how it's really important that you test them out and you try different ones to see what works for you, and don't feel too stuck with them, because it will change as your writing career develops. We've talked a little bit about some techniques for keeping going. So using the Pomodoro timer, setting goals so you know what you're about to do and set small steps so you can make progress on that. And then using accountability structures, whether they're external ones within your institution and other people, or internal ones that keep you focused and keep you moving forward. And finally, just thinking about some of the techniques you can use to overcome like initial writing blocks when you're staring at the blank page.